at them. But I'll also say that he had a very unique style of dreadlocks. They were very thick, almost like a freeform style of dreadlocks, and that's another thing that I didn't expect from Derrick Rose. I feel like it's one of those J. Cole moments to where J. Cole has a very clean, nice cut for such a long time, and then you see him get freeform dreadlocks. Now obviously Derrick Rose doesn't have freeform dreadlocks, but he has that kind of freestyle kind of look to them, especially in this photo right here. Now obviously his hair is not completely mature, but I can tell you this, that those dreadlocks aren't going anywhere. And obviously there was more pictures that show his progression before this photo, but this is one of my favorite photos because it shows his hair standing up. And in my opinion, I love when the dreadlocks are standing up. Like in my first set of dreadlocks, I remember the stages to where my hair was about maybe 4 inches getting into 5 inches, and my dreadlocks were only maybe 4 months old, and they would be standing up, and it was just one of my favorite times during that locking process. But one thing I also want to point out is that the dreadlocks on top of his head and closer to his hairline are not as mature as the hair that is in the back of his head and on the sides of his head. And that's for very obvious reasons. When you sleep with your dreadlocks, you lay on the back of your head, you lay on the sides of your head, and it's really almost impossible to lay on top of your head and allow that maturing process to take place while you're sleeping. But what happens is when you're laying on your head, it mats the hair together and allows it to lock up even quicker. And that's why it's important to integrate wearing hats and, you know, things like that can actually help promote the locking process. And one thing we'll notice about Derrick Rose is he goes through kind of a semi-freeform process to where he allows it to lock up and kind of go for a freeform journey, if you will, for a little bit. And then he goes and retwists his hair, makes it look nice and neat, and, you know, does hairstyles, which we'll see in the next photo. Looking at this one right here, we're able to see how kind of freeform like his hair looks. And obviously this is a huge jump from the last photo we just seen, but I definitely wanted to emphasize where he came from. Now I do have an initial video on Derrick Rose if you want to see how he actually started his dreadlocks and so on and so forth, talking about his hair type, the method, and the maintenance. And I'll go ahead and cover those really quickly. His hair type is about a 4B. And guys, it's very typical for that 4B hair type to have dreadlocks. I'd put it this way, if you see someone with dreadlocks, a lot of the time they have a 4B hair type. Now obviously there are the exception of the people with straight hair and obviously the people with curly hair. Now in my opinion, I actually include the curly hair types like, you know, the low 3 range or even the 2 range in straight hair, just because the methods are about the same in getting dreadlocks. Like if you have curly hair, you can do twist and rip just the same as if you had completely straight hair. Now speaking about Derrick Rose being a 4B hair type, there's many methods you can choose from because the straighter your hair is, the less you have to choose from. You only have like twist and rip, you have back combing, you have crochet hooking, and really those are the only ones that I would actually recommend. Now when it comes to a tighter curl pattern like 4B, so if you have this hair type, and even if you have, you know, maybe a 3B and up, which is a pretty good curl pattern actually starting out dreadlocks, you have methods like twisting with gel, you have 2-strand twist, you have braid locks, you have interlocking, you have instant locking with the crochet hook. If you wanted to, you can do back combing and twist and rip, but I wouldn't recommend just because it's not suitable and it's not necessary. You have freeform, and obviously everybody can freeform, but it just takes a little bit longer and sometimes doesn't turn out the way people want it to when they want to freeform with, say, they have a straight hair. Another thing that I noticed about Derrick Rose is that he doesn't get a lineup, and that's one thing that I never did on my first set of dreadlocks as well. And then I combed out my dreadlocks, and then I ended up getting a tapered hairline, and then that was when I started doing lineups myself. But that's what we see with Derrick Rose right here. We don't see him getting lineups. Even when he gets into doing hairstyles, we still don't see him doing any lineups. It's almost as if all the hair on his head is pulled into his dreadlocks at this point. And when they do retwists, that's how they do it. They don't leave any hair outside of the dreadlocks, which is actually really cool, and I think in my opinion is a very nice way to actually have dreadlocks versus having to always get a lineup. If you're properly pulling in all your hair into the locks, you wouldn't even notice that someone's missing a lineup. That's why we see a lot of people with full headed dreadlocks that don't have lineups, and you don't even recognize it. But if you have a bunch of hair sticking out of the dreadlock and it looks kind of messy, then you start to notice that, okay, they don't have a lineup, and if they were to get a lineup, you're able to see the difference. But it's really interesting seeing that he's able to still do hairstyles. That just goes to show that he does have his sections all the way down to the roots. He is still maintaining them. He is just very loosely maintaining them. And what I mean by that is he probably only maintains them maybe once a month or maybe even once every 2 months, because majority of the time we see him with the fluffy roots, the afro roots. Everything's a little overgrown, never really retwisted, and if it is retwisted, it is in a hairstyle. And you would honestly think that, you know, being in the NBA and playing these games, you would want to actually have a very maintained hairstyle, but we see all these people with freeform dreadlocks in the NBA now, and in that with afros, and I don't think hair at that point, if you're that skilled at the game, it's not going to bother you. So I think it's what we see with Derrick Rose right here. I feel like his hair is a secondary thing, and I think that's how it is for a lot of people when they do it just for the hairstyle. Moving on to this last photo right here, obviously we see that his roots are overgrown, and if you look at his roots, closer to his forehead right there, it almost looks like he has some really short dreadlocks right there, as if some dreadlocks have fallen out. Now, this could just be an illusion and an angle of what the cameraman was at, but it does look like it could be possible that some dreadlocks might have fallen out. But I find